Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
Around here quite a while back that I assure you was without foundation in fact. They started to talk around here that I drank too much. Now, I know they couldn't have any real evidence on it because I always drink vodka, and everybody knows you can't smell vodka. Well, I'm Bill Sims, and it's my happy privilege to welcome all of you to this, the 15th anniversary of the Blood Group. We hope that we'll live up to the past ones, and that I'm sure that our speakers are outstanding, and I can assure you that our hospitality is unlimited. I'll now ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer, and remember, if you will, our benefactor and friend, Dave R., who is no longer with us. Amen. I'll now ask Harold S. to read our purpose.
I'm Harold Sanford, and I'm an alcoholic. In other words, I'm allergic to alcohol.
Step up here.
I may have to repeat this for some of these hard-hearing people back there. I am Harold Sanford, and I'm an alcoholic. I am allergic to alcohol. I'll now read the purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problems and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy. Neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Thank you, Harold. Joe, will you come up there and read these steps, please?
I'm an alcoholic named Joe Anderson. I put it that way because in order to know who I am, first I have to know what I am. These are the 12 suggested steps in a program of recovery that we try to follow. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all of our defects of character. 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs.
Thank you, Joe. In my confusion, I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Bill Sims. Through the grace of God, I've got a year of sobriety in this program, and with the help of fellow AA and the program, I hope to be 2 years old before the year's out. To our friends and our visitors, we would like to remind them that anonymity is a keystone of our program. You are asked when you leave here to leave the names of people you find here and respect their anonymity on the outside. Do we have any announcements? If not, I'll turn the program over to our chairman, Jim B.
Thank you, Bill. I am Jim Badgett, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm not going to take a lot of our speaker's time tonight. We're very happy to have him. He came here from a very roundabout way. He was born in Arkansas. He went to Oklahoma through Alaska, and he had come here from Oklahoma. And we appreciate the long drive that you've made to be here. He's been long associated with AA. He can tell you how many years. I'll say many years. His name, what I can tell you of it, could be Indian, which would not be out of keeping from being from Oklahoma. His name is Harry Buttermilk. Buttermilk is a nickname, and I'm going to let him have the rest of the time. And Buttermilk, we welcome you.
Thank you. My name is Buttermilk, and I am an alcoholic. Howdy, everybody. Dried out wino, or whatever you choose to call me. I better get me a nice drink here.
Want me to take over?
I'll call you in a minute when I need you. Most of the fellas that come up here say they tell a story to try to relax the audience. I generally try to tell one to relax Buttermilk. You're going to have to take care of yourselves. I heard this story the other day, and it may be as old as Jerusalem, I don't know, but it tickled me, and I'm hard to make laugh. But they told about this. I had an idea this fellow was an alkie, and there's a fellow following one of these closed-in trucks down the highway. And every once in a while, this old boy would whip off the side of the road and jump out of that truck and grab a 2x4 and just start beating the sides of that truck and whamming it around and something awful. And then he'd jump back in and take off. About 2 miles down the road, he'd wheel her over and grab that 2x4 and start beating on it again. And this fellow finally caught up with him, and he said, "Now, fellow, it's none of my business," but he said, "Why are you abusing that truck like that?" He said, "Don't bother me, fella." He said, "I've got a 2-ton truck, and I've got 4 ton of canary birds in there, and if I don't keep half of them a-flying, I'm in trouble." I don't know whether this is appropriate or not. I thought I'd put in a little time to kind of advertise my business. I've come out with a new product, and any of you that needs it, Pauline's taking orders back there. It's new on the market. It's a deodorant, and we call it Stereo. Now, it don't stop any odors, but you can't tell where they're coming from. So if any of you need it, why, get with Pauline. And I guess I should introduce Pauline. She's kind of my co-pilot, and she writes all my speeches and does all these things for me. So, Pauline, would you stand up and let these good people take a look at you? Ain't she a dandy? Kind of a funny thing the way I met Pauline. She didn't know me during my drinking days. And then if there's anything I wanted to know about it, I'll tell her, if you don't mind. But I was working with her brother. I'd been sober a year or two, and dry. And we needed a wheelbarrow. And he said, "My sister's got a wheelbarrow." So we went by to borrow the wheelbarrow, and I got to look at her and got to say a few words, I don't remember what, and then a few days later, when we got through with the wheelbarrow, I took it home. Didn't need any help to get it back home. So we got a little better acquainted on that trip, and I'm a carpenter by trade, or was in those days. And a few days later, I was going by the house, and I had on them carpenter overalls and my hammer in the loop, and I just stopped out in front and walked in the living room and took out a 16-penny nail and drove it in the wall. And she jumped all over me and said, "Well, what are you doing driving my house full of nails?" I said, "Well, I'm going to have someplace to hang my clothes." And then that's what started the deal. Well, I don't hardly know where to start this, but I guess I better start down where I started. I grew up down here in the edge of Arkansas, in a little town of Cincinnati. And I've always been proud of being from Cincinnati, Arkansas. And I've only seen one place that I think I'd ever been from, and I seen it yesterday as I was coming over here. I kind of wish I'd have been from Bucksnorth, Tennessee. But Cincinnati is a very small town. The fact is, it's so small we didn't even have a town idiot, and every town has to have a town idiot. We tried many things in order to have a successful idiot, but none of them worked out. We tried using 2 half-wits. We had a bundle of them, but it didn't work out good, and went on till I got up about 16 years old, and a bunch of us was taking turns of being the idiot. I had a cousin that made a good idiot. I thought he was going to get the job, but my older brothers made a batch of strawberry wine when I was about 16, and I stole a gallon of that and drank it. And they put me on steady after that. But as I say, I grew up down in them hills back during that Hoover boom. And if you think Lazarus was poor, you ought to have made a trip down to Arkansas back during that Depression. And the whole row of preachers was thicker than the fiddlers. And they was preaching the NRA and the Blue Eagle and the End of Time and what have you, and they kept me scared to death all the time. I'm a coward anyway. And it just got plumb confusing to me. And I had a brother that got into this preaching. And I don't know how he did. He didn't have a first-grade education. But he said he was called to preach. He didn't say who called him. He just said he was called to preach. And he said he'd see this vision, or whatever you call it, of a morning. He'd look to the east, and this big sign would loom up in front of him, said GPC. And he'd seen that a number of times, and he thought that meant go preach Christ. So he put his Bible in a canvas sack and took off preaching. And after about 6 months, he hadn't saved a soul. And I told him one day, I said, "Jim, that might have meant go plow corn." But anyhow, he got to preaching, and they like drove me crazy at that. And I can remember they was telling about this beast that is going to come through the country, and he had a hell of a bunch of horns and 5 or 6 heads, and I don't know what all about it, but it was a terrible thing for a hillbilly kid. And I was plowing tomatoes, and I had to turn next to a wooded timber. If there'd have been a deer come out of there, I'd have run that team to death. And they had me in an awful state of mind. And as I said, as poor as we all were, I don't know how it could happen, but it seemed like some way, somehow, we could come up with something to get drunk with every now and then. It'd either be a batch of homebrew, or you could buy that block and tackle whiskey then for 50 cents a pint, and I could steal a Dominecker hen and trade for a pint of whiskey. But it didn't take much to get me drunk in those days. I can remember getting on a mule and starting over at the bootleggers to get a pint, and be a running that mule and a hooping and a hollering before he even got there, just thinking about it. But to make a long story short, I got drunk the first time when I was about 9 years old, and I never quit wanting to drink till about 12 years ago. Now, I've been so drunk I couldn't bend over, and if I got bent over I couldn't get up, but I still wanted another drink. And I left Arkansas on account of my belief. Along in the late 30s, just as the Depression is breaking up, I've often said I left on account of my belief, and I think I did because I got to believing if I didn't get out of there, I was going to starve plumb to death. And I hitchhiked over to Buttermilk, Oklahoma, which is 50 miles north of Tulsa. I say I hitchhiked. I don't know why I put the hitch on there. I just hiked. And I got a job over there. They got an old zinc smelter over there. And they had an old humpback German for a boss. He was the meanest man in the world. Well, he had over 400 men working for him, and when he died, his wife had the heart pallbearers. There wasn't anybody to carry him. And I'm about 20 years old then, if I remember right. And then pretty husky boy. And that old German took a look at me, and he said, "Now, young man, if you can do this work," he said, "I'll pay you $4.81 a day." I said, "Well, you just consider it done, because for that kind of money, I'll do anything and can do anything." I never had heard of anybody making that kind of money. So I got on. And I've always been a man to set goals, you know. I believe in that. And I never have met any of them, but I'm always setting them. And I immediately decided, making this kind of money, in 3 years I can go back to Arkansas and build me a town and run it like it ought to be run. But it didn't work out somehow or another. I got to drinking a little better brand of whiskey, and I got me a new suit of clothes. And the first one I'd ever had, too, I'll have you to know. And I got me a pair of them Bronx Stompers boots and one of them John B. Stetson hats that B made while John was going to dinner, I think. And I got engaged to 3 girls at the same time. Now, you talk about a hillbilly getting an overdrive. I was turning it on. But my money wasn't accumulating like I wanted it to. Seemed like I just wasn't gaining anything. And then after I got to doing so good, I wrote to this brother that is a preaching and told him how well I was doing. And he come out and he got a job at the smelter. Paid better than that preaching he was doing. And he too got him a pair of boots and a hat and a suit of clothes. And then we pooled our money and got us a Model A Ford. And now we was really uptown. And we was both drinking pretty good. He could drink, too, even when he was preaching, I think. I never caught him at it, but I think he could. He was an extremist. He was really way off here to preach in hell's fire and brimstone, or out here whooping somebody. He never could hit a happy medium. Well, we decided we ought to come back down to folks in Arkansas and visit the folks, so we got us a supply of booze and come down and visited the folks around for a few days and told all of them, if you need anything, just call us. And we were getting about ready to head for home, and we'd been having to pay 20 cents a pound for bacon out there around Bartlesville, and that wasn't going too good with us, because always down home, when we run out of meat, we'd just kill a hog. So we're driving along about as drunk as a man ought to stay the year around, I guess. And we run into a bunch of them old hogs. They run outside then. And we just stopped and cornered one up in the corner of a rail fence and caught us about 150-pound shoat and throwed him in the back seat of that A model and headed for Bartlesville. And we were driving along. We forgot about the hog. And we're out there pretty close to Pryor somewhere, and I looked up, and there's one of them Holstein cars backed in there stopping everybody. And I looked at Jim, and I said, we might be in trouble. And I looked back at that hog, and he'd kind of got leaned up in the back seat like he was one of us. So I just pulled off my hat and put on the hog's head. And that patrolman, he walked up and throwed that flashlight in my face, and he said, what's your name? I said, Buttermilk Smith. Throwed it over on my brother, and he said, what's your name? He said, Jim Smith. He throwed it back on that hog with my hat on, and he said, what's your name? I gouged that old hog with my thumbnail that way, and he said, oink. And he stood there a minute, and he said, well, go on. And as he was walking back over to the car, I could still hear him, and he was shaking his head, and he said to that other patrolman, he said, I tell you right now, there's none of them Smiths very good looking, but he said, that old oink's the ugliest damn man I ever seen in my life. Thank you. And I've had so many experiences, and a lot of times in telling them I've had people to doubt these things that I tell, and this just tears me up. But I had another one that I generally tell, and it's about the Fat Stock Show down in Fort Worth. And all of my life I'd wanted to go to that Fat Stock Show. And every time they'd have one, I was either too drunk to go or too broke to go. So I throwed a sober spell for a month or two and saved up a little money and got ready for this Fat Stock Show. Got on the bus and went to Fort Worth. Well, I landed in Cowtown a day or two before the show started. Wanted to be early, you know. And got me a gallon of that sweet Lucille. That is my favorite drink in those days. And started drinking it. And I reckon that it had an effect on them Texans' personality or something. I don't know what. But every time I'd try to talk to one of them bronc stompers, he wanted to whoop me. And some of them was getting the job done. They had both eyes shut, my nose broke, my front teeth all loosened up, and I was in a pretty sad shape. And of course I'm staying down there at one of them Skid Row hotels, and this old gal that run it, God love her, she was just as kind as her mother's love, and so ugly she'd have to slip up on the dipper to get a drink of water. But she was good to me. I liked her, and she was kind. And she told me one day, she said, I don't believe these people like you. And I said, well, they haven't gone out of their way to show it in you if they do. She said, if I was you, I'd leave. And I said, well, if I can get to where I can see, I will. I said, I'm not enjoying this like I thought I would. So after a few days of putting poultices on my eyes and feeding me soup, we got me to where I could see pretty good. And we packed my little suitcase and went down by the wine store and got me a bottle or two and put in it. And went down and we bought me a ticket to Amarillo on the train. I thought I'll go out in West Texas and see if these people are any more sociable than they are here. Well, I got on the train and got in the car. It wasn't loaded too heavy, and got me a seat by myself and was getting ready to enjoy the trip. And just as the train was pulling out of the station, in the door come a woman with a pair of shoe heels on about that high. Nowadays about that high. That one's cut off. Walking right straight up and down with a fur coat on that is a shedding, and carrying a little old fuzzy dog she called Poo Poo, and sat down to me and started chattering like a punk, and Poo Poo grabbed at me. And I stood about as much of that as I could, and I got up and got my suitcase and went back down through the train, and I found the club car. And there wasn't anyone in it. It was empty. So I got me a seat by the window, and this old gal at the hotel there had gave me a pipe and a pouch of tobacco. And I had that with me. And I got me a seat by the window and raised the window and took a drink of wine and lit my pipe, and I thought, well, this is going to be a pretty good trip after all. Lo and behold, it wasn't 10 minutes till the door opened, and in come that woman with poo-poo. Come over and sat down to me, and she said, now, you may have to quit smoking that pipe. It might make poo-poo sick. I said, now, if God don't think any more of you and poo-poo than I do, you're lost. And if I was you, I'd go on and peddle your paper somewhere else. I've got some serious drinking and thinking to do. And she just kept sitting there mouthing at me. And I laid my pipe down in the ashtray directly. And when I did, she grabbed it and throwed it out the window. Well, when she did, I just grabbed poo-poo and throwed him out the window. Well, if you ever seen a woman go into a tailspin, now she did. And she called the porter and the conductor, and I think the engineer even come back. And I thought they was going to lynch me. And finally that old conductor got upset, and he said, if you people don't sit down and shut up, he said, I'll put you both off of the train right here. I said, well, that's good enough for me. I could probably have more fun under one of them mesquite trees than I'm having here. But he didn't put us off there, but when we got into the next little town, he did put us both off. And I reckon every farmer and rancher in 20 miles of there had met the train, and the dock is full of people, and she is running up and down through there pointing at me, saying, that savage man throwed my little dog off the train. My little poo-poo's out there starving to death. And I thought they was going to get up a lynch party. And pretty soon here come one of them harnessed cops that I got along with so well in those days. And he said, did you throw that woman's dog off of the train? I said, indeed I did, and I'm going to stick 200 pounds of fist in your mouth if you open it any more, because this is none of your business. Well, he thought a minute, and he said, come to think about it, I don't guess it is. And about that time, that old gal started jumping up and down and hollering, poo-poo, poo-poo. And I looked out, and here come that dog up the railroad track with my pipe in his mouth. Well, I guess I was supposed to talk a little about AA instead of just telling stories all day, but I don't know much about it. It's just one of them things that happened. I started drinking quite young, and when I was 22 years old, I went to the North Country, hired out and went up in Canada, Yukon country, and I stayed sober the biggest part of 18 months up there due to the fact that booze cost you $50 a fifth. But I managed to throw a few pretty good drunks while I was up there. I knew a little nurse that worked in the hospital. She'd get me a quart of that alcohol once in a while, and I'd drink it. And then I had an old buddy, and he and I got our money together, and just before Christmas, we sent with a truck driver that's coming out to the States, and we bought a foot locker full of whiskey. And he brought it back to us, and we was going to sell that over Christmas and make some money. You could get $50 a fifth for it. And you know, about a week before Christmas, we decided to sample one of them. And we ain't never sold one yet. We drank that whole thing, and they named us the bootleggers, and that's what they called us from then on till we left up there. And then I come back after that 18 months and got my wife and baby, and I went back to Alaska, to Cordova, Alaska. And I stayed up in that country for 10, 12 years. And I was the police chief there in Cordova for about 4 years. Now, if you think white herb is salty, you ought to come to my town. And how many of you ever heard of Matt Kimes? I imagine most of you older fellas haven't you? Well, here's one of the worst Oklahoma outlaws that we ever had, I reckon, as far as being a cold-blood killer. And Matt got out of the penitentiary and committed another crime. I forget what it was. Probably killed somebody because he kind of liked to. This didn't bother Matt any. Well, as the police chief, I went to the post office one day and I got a flyer from the FBI saying that they thought he was coming in that direction. Now, this was the first, I think, sincere prayer that I ever said. I knelt down there and I said, "Dear God, don't let that man get off the boat in my town." But I didn't want any part of it. But we had a lot of characters up in that country, and I like to talk about Malamute Slim. Here's one of my old Alaska buddies. Malamute was about a hammer handle taller than I am, and about half as big around. And he had one eye knocked plumb out of his head, just a hole there, and he didn't wear no patch over it. He just had a hole in his head. Oh, there's a lot of them totem poles had better-looking heads on them than Malamute did. And here's one of my drinking buddies, and Slover Slim Jensen, he looked about like him. And we've got to where we never spoke of getting drunk, but if one of us got a little drunker than usual, we might comment on he got a little drunker last night. But this drunk, we just stayed that way. And we was in Seward, Alaska. And old Malamute staggered off across the street to go do something. And here come an old truck down through there, flopping its wings, and run over him. Knocked him off out there in the bar pit and skinned him up pretty bad. And we went and got him, carried him up to this little clinic, and there's a doctor and him patching him up in there. And here come this gal that carries the pads, you know, and said, "Where was you born, and why, and how old are you," and all this stuff, you know. And why she ever asked this question first, I'll never know. But the first thing she done, she looked over in there at Malamute, and she said, "Are you married?" He said, "Hell no, woman, a truck run over me." He was something. But anyhow, I weathered 4 years of being the police chief there and got by with it pretty good. And it's a good job, but didn't have anything to do much. They didn't never arrest a man for being drunk. Booze kind of made that country, and it still has a lot of respect up there. And everybody drank. And they thought nothing about it. There was kind of an unwritten law up there that if you'd pay your bills and leave the other man's wife alone, you was a pretty good citizen. And due to the fact that the city furnished pretty near everything I used except the booze, and a lot of it, they didn't know there was, but they did. I managed to keep my bills paid, and I didn't see anybody's wife that wanted to have anything to do with me, so I didn't have any trouble anyway. I do like to tell this, and it really happened. They got an old woman judge there one time, and she got to giving them drunks 30 days and $100. Well, they wouldn't stand still for that, so they got to calling a jury trial. And you couldn't get a jury to stick a drunk in Alaska, they just turning them loose. And we got an old boy up for stealing some tools off of a boat. And he called for a jury trial. And the verdict come back, said, "Not guilty, but you bring them tools back." Well, anyhow, I weathered that 4 years and quit to keep from getting fired. And I went back into the construction business. That's what I went up there as, a construction man. And then I got so hard, so bad that even those Alaska contractors wouldn't hire me. Now, they liked drunks, too. I worked for a little old Scotch Irishman for a long time, and I've heard him many a time interviewing an old boy for a job, and he had one bad eye. He had to turn his head to look at you. And I heard old Ross be talking to this fellow, and directly he'd say, "Do you drink?" No, I don't drink. "I can't use you," he'd say. And he meant it. And you take old Slim Jensen, he could do anything. If your watch stopped running, he could fix it. If you had a D8 Caterpillar to fix, he could fix it. And if you wanted the tallest tree in the country topped, he could top it. But if you wanted to stay drunk for 6 months, he could do that too. And he did. But you know, them contractors would watch old Slim when he'd hit town. He'd have $3,000 or $4,000, and he'd spend it in 3 or 4 days. And then he'd start borrowing and hawking and begging, and they'd watch him till he got plumb down till he couldn't get any more. And then one of these bosses would come by with a fifth whiskey sticking out of his coat pocket, and old Slim would follow him aboard the boat, and he'd give him a drink, throw the rest of it overboard, and he had Slim caught for another 6 months. And he had a hand, too. But I wasn't that good, I guess. They didn't want me that bad. And I just got so bad that I couldn't work for anybody. Now, I think it was in 1951, I'm sure it was, I had busted out up there, had a little money, and I caught an airplane and started home to Tulsa, or to Bartlesville. I had a mother and 3 brothers there at that time. And it was a long ways home, as I remember. I remember getting off of the airplane in Great Falls, Montana. Why I got off, I don't know, to get a drink, I guess. Then this time went by, I don't know how long, because I would go into them blackouts for a week at a time. And I come to one day, setting up in a hotel room, and I got the key and looked at it, and it said White Sulphur Springs, Montana. Now that kind of reminded me of what I heard Dave one time tell about Maryville. He told him about some fellow that stopped to see him and say, "I was just a-going through and I stopped to see you." He said, "There ain't no damn truth in that, because nobody just goes through Maryville." He said, "It's hard enough to find when you're looking for it." And that's the way with White Sulphur Springs. I don't know how a man could have got there if he'd have been trying to. Because it's plumb off of the beaten path, out in the wilderness. It's a kind of a cross between a sheep herder and a logging town. And here I'm sitting in the room and wondering, how did I get here and what's happened and all of this stuff. Looked, I didn't have no suitcase, and I still don't know where it went. But I went downstairs and thought maybe if I'll talk to the clerk I can learn something. I stood around and talked to him a while, and he talked like everything was very normal, and said, "How you feeling today?" And I said, "Fine." And I said, "Well, I guess it's about time for me to leave here." I had $2 or $3 in my pockets all. And I told him goodbye and started out the door, and he said, "Don't you want your money?" "Oh," I said, "I'd forgot it." And I hadn't forgot it, because I didn't know I had any. And he went and opened the safe and handed me somewhere between $400 and $500. I don't remember what. Pretty good handful of money for a drunk that's broke. And I thought, well, I guess I've robbed something. So I had to stay and find out where I got that money. And he finally told me, he said, "You've been here for 3 or 4 days playing poker with them sheep herders out there." And I never have remembered anything about it. But I took that anyway and took the money. And 2 or 3 weeks later, some way I landed in Bartlesville. And all of that money was gone. And I had on everything that I owned. I've often said I had everything I owned in a shoebox, but I don't think I even had a shoebox. I think I was wearing everything I owned. And I had these three brothers there, and it was long about income tax time, and they was making out income taxes and talking about how much money they'd made. And I figured up, and I had spent more money that year for taxes, income tax, than either one of them had made. And didn't even have a change of clothes. So I got thinking there might be a little something wrong with my managing. And I was staying out there with my mother and brother John Raymond. That's my slow-talking brother. He talks slower than I do, but he thinks faster. And my drinking was upsetting them, and they was upsetting me, so I just left. And I wandered off out the edge of town. There was an old place out there, they called it Honest John's Cabins. It was an old beer joint, and 4 or 5 old cabins set in there on the bank of the creek. And this old gal that run it was a good-hearted old gal. She'd run every bootleg joint in Oklahoma. And she'd give me one of those cabins to sleep in, and I'd sit around there and tell stories to her customers, and they'd buy me a bottle or 2 of beer, which I couldn't drink. I never could drink beer. I could drink 2 bottles of beer and just open my mouth, and it's like an artesian well. And she'd buy me a 5 or 2 of whiskey a day, and I'd been out there quite a while. And I know that I hadn't changed clothes because I didn't have any to change in. And I doubt if I'd shaved very often because I wasn't too excited about that either when I was drinking. And one day she told me, she said, that brother of yours come by here looking for you. And this upset me. I thought, I'm not bothering them. Why don't they leave me alone? And little did I realize how near they was doing just that. But it went on a few days, and she said that brother of yours was by here again. And every time she'd tell me, I'd get a little madder. And one morning she come out to the cabin real early and shook me, and she said, that brother of yours is out here, and he's come to get you. Well, I jumped up and puked right quick and took another drink and jumped into that uniform that is standing there. And I said, I'll whip him. I was always going to whip somebody. I said, I'll whip him. And then this fellow I was going to whip his big toe, but he stood 6'5" and weighed 225 pounds. And he could whip the cash pen full of buttermilk when I was in my heyday. But I come out of there to whoop Big Tobe, and Big Tobe raised me. My daddy died when I was quite small, and he is the fellow that fell there to raising me. And when I got up close enough that I don't know whether he could see me better or smell me, but he broke down and started crying. Well, I said, you can't hardly whoop a man and him a bawling, so I give up on that. Now, that thing won't work. Good heavens, Frank. But I did too, if you want to know something. Anyhow, those preachers would preach, and I'd shake. And I told him, I said, Jim, if I don't get a drink, I'm going to die. Well, he said, that's all right. He said, I'm a preacher. I can take care of everything. Didn't upset him a bit. And I mean, I would have. I'm sure I would have. But I guess God takes care of us drunks. And a certain man, when I was drunk, I was scared. I always was. Don't know what I was just scared. And up in front, there could drove a fellow in one of them jukesters. I think they just made them about 1 or 2 years. And anyhow, that was one of the first ones I'd seen. And he got out, and he was a little man about 5'2", with a bow haircut and a tweed suit. The 3 things I'd always hated worse than it. Well, as soon as I seen him, I figured, now that's one of them damn little old detectives, and he followed me from Fairbanks, Alaska down here. I didn't know what I'd done, but I knew I'd done something. Probably killed one of them sheep herders and didn't remember. I walked up and called me by name, called me Buttermilk, which most people do. And he went over and shook hands with this preacher and called him by name. I said, well, he snitched on me. That's what's happened. But I'll never forget the little guy. He was such a happy-looking little fellow, and he'd just walk around and clap his hands and just seem to feel so good, you know. And I thought, well, this may be a lot of fun to you, but if you think you're going to get them damn handcuffs on me, you got another father coming, because I thought I learned from the punch will put you away. And he'd look up at me just like a making fed turk, you know. He wasn't really that hurt. Then he walked down, he looked up at me and he said, man, you're sick. And I said, well, that didn't take no genius to figure that out, did it? No, he said, I'm not a genius. But he said, I could help you. And he'd walk around and he'd clap them hands, and I just went and shoot him. And nobody had to have anything to shoot with. But he walked up to me and he said, you're going to have a drink. I said, well, you tell that damn preacher that. I already know. He went over and told the preacher, he said, he's going to have a drink. Well, he said, if you think so. So he jumped in the Jeep and he took off, and he wasn't gone 5 minutes till he come back to carrying a fork right by the neck, you know, just like you're supposed to. And he walked up and handed that to me, and I went in one of those riggers and just throwed it out in the grass. I'm glad there wasn't any rocks there. Didn't work. And he went and got it, and he poured out about a half a water glass full of it. And the put got this one arm down standing around behind me and holding me by the hair of the head. I couldn't bear say nothing. I was in a sob shape. I done that for 20 years. That ain't long. I've been sober for me that long. Counting the 8 years before I started drinking. This preacher behind me, and he held my head back, and he pulled this booze down me. And pretty soon I began to come around, and the white horse got up and left. He didn't like, that horse didn't like a drink. I could tell he'd always leave when I got a drink or two. And we got to talking, I could talk real sensible then. And after he asked me if I'd ever heard the word AA, and I said no. Well, he said, would you be interested in joining it? And I said, fellow, I'll join the Ku Klux Klan if it's necessary just to get this preacher and these people to leave me alone. Well, he said, I think they're fixing to anyway. And we talked about it, and he told me some of the fellows that was in it, which he wasn't supposed to, but there wasn't anybody there have over 2 or 3 years sobriety, and they had a big group. They had over 50, then they were real active, and they're going, well, they were humming. And he told me, he said, I'll come and get you tonight and take you to a meeting. Now, I want to tell this story because I think of the way they 12-step people and the way they handled people back then. And the way I do it now, I don't know how you people do, but I'm not near as good a hand at it as those fellows were. Anyhow, they came and got me, took me to a meeting. And a lot of people say, I don't remember anything about the first meeting. I remembered everything about the first meeting. It amused me. About 50 people there, and snubbing on me that I'd drunk with years before. Had a little old pug-nosed Indian there, and his nose turned right up that way. And he rode on in 10-gallon hats, and I always wondered why it was to keep him from drowning when it rained. And he jumped up and he said, I've been sober 3 years. And I said, well, why don't you quit lying then? But he had. I couldn't believe that Andy had been sober 3 years. God love him, he died about a year and a half ago. I had
24 years sobriety, I think, when he died. He was a dandy little guy. He used to drink with him back years ago, and never got drunk with him, but I had to help him. It didn't take but a minute, but you had to do it. I got to tell this man, and don't have nothing. They said I could have all the time I wanted. I don't know who said it, somebody did. See, one time he bought a new Buick. He was a pretty well to be Indian and drove the headlights, you know, 2 or 3 of them, I think. And he bought a new Buick. This was about 41, I think. We got in it and headed for Tulsa, drunk. And we hit that Sandy River Bridge and totaled it out. Well, we just got a ride back into town and we bought another. And we got in it and headed east. The last thing I remember was going through Nevada and I was driving. Well, the next morning, the birds woke me up as long as spring of the year, and I got up and looked out, and it was a beautiful day. And I didn't have no idea where we was than nothing. And I looked out, and there was a gal, probably 20, 21 years old, coming down across there in a swimsuit. And I said, "Girl, what time is this?" And she stopped and put her hand up on her hip and looked at me, and she said, "Well, what's the matter with you?" I said, "Well, I've been drunk. What else would cause a man not to know where he is?" She said, "This is Mary Missouri." I said, "Well, thank you." She said, "Have you got a telephone in there?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I want to use it." I said, "You can't come in here with that outfit on. I've got a drunk Indian in here." Well, she said, "I'm not afraid of drunk Indians. I just want to use the telephone." I said, "Well, enter at your own risk." And she come in and went from it and was standing there using the phone, and this Indian come through and raised up and seen that. And he come up out there, looked just like a helicopter, you know, coming out of there. So I just saw her being back down in the bed till she got out of there. That was just running time. And I forgot where I was. Now, that's me. We'll go on in a minute. Anyhow, they took me to the meeting, and after it was over, there were 3 of these guys taking me home. And one of them said to me, said, "Have you ever had BPs?" "Oh," I said, "No." I said, "I'm not that bad. I drink a little too much, but I'm nothing like that." And then it dawned on me, they're fixing to take me back to the preacher and leave him. And I told them then about this White House. And I said, "Yeah, that's what it is." He said, "You're going to have a little trouble." But he said, "If you want to sober up, we're going to help you sober up." He said, "We're going to loan you in a minute. And we're going to talk to your wife into coming back so you can make free health in that year or 2. And they told me a dozen things they wouldn't do. But they said, "We will help you sober up if you want us to." And I wanted them to. Now 2 and sometimes 3 of them fellas stayed with me around the clock for 2 weeks or longer. And they never did mention a doctor, they never did mention a hospital or nothing. They just said, "We'll sober you up." And they did. And we fought the White House, we run him off, and one night the room got full of snakes. And they wasn't poison snakes, I wasn't afraid of them. One of them had on glasses, no bugs me quite about it. But I wasn't afraid of them, and they stayed with me, and they got me sober. And remember there was an old baker went to meetings, an old bald-headed man. And I had to run in this bald-headed man and put me in his bald-headed man. If I could afford to, I would, but I can't. And he said, "Now you take this book and read it." I said, "I don't need the book. I just needed to quit drinking booze, and I've got it down, so why bother with the book?" So I didn't read the book. We got to going places and making talks, and I got to making talks. I told you I delivered the message. I'd been sober about a month. And I delivered the message over there at Tulsa that I probably outlived the Gettysburg Address. I put it on. And I thought this fellow was tough. And he went on 3 or 4 months, and I don't remember just what happened. It didn't have to be too bad. Something come along that I couldn't swallow, and I had to wash it down. And I remember this slow-talking brother was with me that day, and I said, I'm going in and get a half a pint. Now, you know damn well I can take a half of a pint. Well, he said, looks to me like anybody could. I went in there and about that half a pint, and he put it in that little old sack, and it embarrassed me. So I just bought 3/4 and come walking out with it. And that embarrassed him. And I know to get the look on John's face when he looked in that sack, because he knew what was coming. Well, I was drunk for another 6 months. And then I'd get in jail or get in the hospital or something and dry out, and I'd go back to AA. And there's something here if I could find it. And invariably, one of them old bald-headed men wanted me to read that book. And I'd get around it somewhere, and I found about one and read enough to get in discussions with people. I like to discuss things, you know. But I didn't read the book in its entirety for many years. To make a long story short, I stayed drunk half of the time and sober, dry half of the time for 10 years. And I would come there every night when I was sober. I don't know whether it's because there wasn't anywhere else that I could go, or whether I was really seeking for something I don't know. But it seemed that I could not stay sober any length of time. And I know now why I couldn't. And I'll go on into this. There was one of them 3 fellows that set up at me when I was trying to dry out. The name of Tom. And Tom's still sober. He's got 26 years. He was one of the hard-headed Republicans, and besides that, there's a lot of other things wrong with it. He was just a man that you couldn't hardly get along with, but I remembered his going the way and how devoted he was to this program. He believed in it. And I knew him before he quit drinking, and I knew him after, and it was a great change in the man. Still not enough that I like him, and I still don't. But I went to see him anyway. After 10 years, and after almost dying in the hospital. And I don't know what time it was. It was dark, and I didn't have the money to buy a watch in those days. And I went up and knocked on his door. And he said, who is it? And I told him. He said, what do you want? I said, I want to talk to you. He said, well, I don't want to talk to you. I've already talked to you. He said, go on and leave me alone. I said, my time, I'm going to lay down here on the porch and wait a morning, and I'll see you if you don't want to get up now. So he finally got up and put on the robe and come out there and told me everything but buttermilk. And when he told me, he said, I'm going to tell you something. He said, I'm going to tell you how I got sober. And he said, I've known many other alcoholics in my life, and they all had to do the same thing. Maybe not exactly the same way, but it all amounts to the same thing. Now he said, you go down there in the park, or under the bridge, or where you're sleeping, and go down by a bridge button, or a tree, and try to think everything out of your life except God as you understand me. And he said, you better get to know him. And see if you and him can't come to some kind of an agreement on how to quit drinking. Well, I left now at time, and I had 3 more to walk. Back out to this brother, and I didn't know for sure he was going to let me in the house. But he did. He let me in the back porch on this same cot where I'd sobered up 10 years prior to that. And I thought I tried everything else, and I heard many people say the same thing, and I ignored it. Maybe I wasn't ready up until then, but I remember very well getting down on my knees by the side of that cot on that concrete floor. And I know what time it was then. But when I got up from there, it was daylight. And that's something I can't explain. There wasn't no bells ring and no flashes of lightning or nothing big happened. But when I got up from there, I knew that I no longer had to drink if I didn't want to. And this has been a little over 12 years ago. And I haven't had the drink since that day, and I have not had a compulsion to drink. And I remember that's what I prayed for God to do, is to remove the compulsion for me to drink. But I knew that if I continued to want to drink, that I would drink. And I've got many buddies that I've known over the years that just thought just on one day at a time, and I'm not saying anything again one day at a time. That's the way the program is. And it's good. Just to make it one day at a time, and I know it was not easy for him. And should it have happened that way for me, I doubt if I could have ever sobered up. But you see, God knows what we can take and what we can't, so He showed me a different way to stay sober, and I've not had a drink or the compassion to take a drink for over 12 years. And for that I am grateful. I've had trouble with living. I don't and I know them 4 other days been a wonderful days for me since I quit drinking. I've had some bad ones. I've had to change my way of thinking many times. I always kind of criticized people that didn't drink for being broke. I couldn't figure out why a man that didn't drink was broke. I thought if I could get away from this drinking, I'd immediately be a millionaire. But it hadn't happened. Things have happened that didn't work out. And I'll tell you a little story about that. Back when I was doing this slipping and sliding, I was in Lamesa, Texas. And I had a nice little group there. And I'd been attending meetings, and I slipped off and got drunk. And I quit over talking about them slips. I don't think I had slips. I just planned to get drunk and then do it. Anyhow, I was drunk, and I went down to see a couple that I knew by the name of Bob and her name every name. And I was up on the porch and knocking on the door, and I noticed this old couple, and I thought that must be their parents, so they could hear. Out on the porch and looked at me and then went back in the house. And the next thing I knew, a couple of them harnessed bulls showed up. And I was a block off with another man on another porch trying to get in the house. I wasn't even out that place. And now they took me down and stopped me up. And there was nobody went to other than the Red, and I liked Red. And Red had 4 years sober. And I called old Red the next morning to come get me out. Cost $10. And Red come down, but I could tell by looking at him that he wasn't going to get me out. And I said, well, why don't you get me out of here? Well, he said, I haven't got the $10. And I thought a minute, I said, have you got $2? Yeah, he said, I've got $2. I said, will you take it and go down there across the railroad track? And there's a white house down there, crimson and blue. And there's a colored woman there that is selling you half a gallon of wine for that $2. And he said, what am I going to do with it? He said, I can't get it in here to you. I said, well, drink it, man. If you've been sober 4 years and haven't got $10, you're just spending it all anyway. And that's kind of the way I thought about it at that time. Now, I hope none of you people ask me for $10 tonight before I get out of here, because I doubt if I've got it. But as I've often said, some of my worst days since I got sober were better than the good ones when I was drinking. I was a bad drunk. I used to be a thumbing through a magazine, see a picture of the Battle of Four Roses, and get to crossing its mouth till I couldn't talk just to looking at it, even in the sober days. So miracles do happen to these people, and I'm one of them. It's a miracle that I got to come here. I've been wanting to come here to this conference for a long time. And so it finally worked out. And I'd certainly like to say thanks to the committee and whoever's responsible for us being here. We've had a wonderful trip coming down. It's good to see all of you. And keep smiling, and we'll see you around.
Buttermilk, that has to be the junk log, the travel log, to top them all. And this being a program based on honesty, we accept every word of it as fact. Along with it was a wonderful old message that I'm sure will stay with us for a long time. We certainly enjoyed having you. We have no fees and fees as we say in our purpose, but we have expenses, and we'd like to ask your assistance on our expenses. Joe, would you?